Every human carries a conflict within, but few ever recognize it. It's not a battle of weapons or armies. It's the quiet struggle between control and freedom, between obedience and truth. This war hides beneath routines, in the decisions we don't question, in the silence we mistake for peace. It reshapes the way we think, molds our choices, and steals our voice without us noticing. The most dangerous part? It convinces us there is no battle at all. Yet every time you hold back a question, every time you bury a thought, every time you follow without reflection, you are fighting on the battlefield of your own mind. This is the story of that unseen struggle. The greatest wars are not fought on land or sea, but in the silent corners of the mind. Here, battles are waged without weapons, fought between fear and courage, doubt and conviction. The obedient mind becomes the perfect battlefield, because it often does not realize a war exists at all. Silence covers the struggle, making it invisible even to the one who fights it. On this battlefield, commands act as invisible generals. They dictate where thought can go and where it must not wander. The obedient mind follows without realizing that each unchallenged order builds a wall around its freedom. The war is not about external enemies. It is about reclaiming the authority of one's own thoughts. Fear is the weapon most often used in this silent conflict. It whispers that questions are dangerous, that disobedience will cost too much, that comfort is safer than freedom. Each time fear wins, thought retreats, and the battlefield shrinks. Over time, the mind becomes a fortress where only obedience is allowed to live. Hope, however, is the weapon of resistance. It appears in small sparks, an unanswered question, a restless thought, a dream too strong to bury. These sparks may seem weak against the weight of commands, but they carry the power to ignite entire revolutions within the self. On this battlefield, even the faintest light can change the tide. The obedient mind often disguises submission as peace. It convinces itself that silence means harmony, that compliance means wisdom. Yet beneath this illusion, the spirit knows the truth. Peace without freedom is merely quiet oppression. The battlefield is not silent because there is no war. It is silent because the war has been hidden. History shows that the most obedient minds have been both victims and enablers of oppression. Tyrants survive not only because of their cruelty, but because of those who obeyed without question. This battlefield extends beyond the individual. It shapes families, communities, and entire nations. The war inside one mind often becomes the war inside many. On the personal level, the hidden battlefield creates fractures in identity. People suppress their own desires, dreams, and truths to remain loyal to authority. The self becomes divided. One side whispers what is real, the other repeats what is commanded. This split is the cost of obedience, and it is paid quietly, every day. Yet even the most obedient mind cannot silence the battlefield completely. Restlessness, unease, and quiet dissatisfaction leak through. These are not weaknesses, but signs that the spirit is still alive. The battlefield may be buried, but it is never erased. To feel unsettled is to be reminded that there is still a war worth fighting. The turning point comes when the obedient mind recognizes the battlefield for what it is. Awareness changes everything. Once a person sees that their silence has been shaped, their choices manipulated, their thoughts restrained, the war is no longer invisible. Awareness does not end the struggle, it begins it. But now the individual is no longer fighting blind. The mind's hidden battlefield is not a place to fear, but a place to reclaim. It is where obedience can be challenged, where courage can be tested, where freedom can be restored. To enter this battlefield knowingly is to step into the deepest form of liberation, the power to choose thought over silence, truth over command, self over submission. Stillness is often mistaken for peace, but many times it is nothing more than a graveyard for voices. The obedient mind learns to remain quiet, not because it has nothing to say, but because it has been trained to believe its words carry no weight. The stillness that results is not calm. It is suppression. And in that suppression, countless voices are buried alive. When voices are silenced, truth loses its power. Questions that could have sparked dialogue vanish into unspoken thoughts. Ideas that might have changed lives remain hidden in the corners of the mind. Stillness becomes a blanket that suffocates creativity, courage, and authenticity. The obedient mind confuses this silence with order, but it is the quietness of decay. The drowning of voices happens slowly. At first, a person silences themselves to avoid conflict. Later, silence becomes habit, until the very act of speaking feels foreign. Over time, the inner voice grows weaker, unsure of whether it even deserves to be heard. What was once vibrant expression becomes an echo lost in the stillness. Societies built on obedience thrive on this drowning. Citizens are told that dissent disturbs harmony, that questioning is disloyal, that speaking out endangers unity. Over time, entire populations learn to swallow their voices. What appears to be order is merely an ocean of stillness, where individuality has been drowned for the sake of control. In families, voices are often buried under expectations. Children told to be quiet or don't argue grow into adults who silence themselves before others. Spouses who learn to keep peace by avoiding honesty lose the intimacy of genuine connection. The cost is not only silence, but the slow death of relationships built without true expression. Workplaces echo the same stillness. Employees hold back ideas afraid of ridicule or punishment. Leaders hear only agreement, never challenge. This false harmony becomes dangerous because problems go unspoken until they become crises. The voices that could have prevented collapse are drowned beneath the obedient stillness of the office. The tragedy is that stillness is not always forced. Many times, people convince themselves that silence is safer, wiser, or more respectable. They carry the weight of unsaid words, believing their sacrifice protects others. Yet this sacrifice is rarely noble. It denies the world the truth that only their voice could have brought to light. But drowned voices never disappear completely. They resurface in dreams, in art, in moments of frustration, when silence can no longer be maintained. They live on as whispers in the conscience, reminding the obedient mind that something vital has been lost. Even in stillness, the truth waits to rise again, refusing to die. The breaking of stillness begins with courage, the courage to speak when silence feels easier. A single word, a single question, can ripple through the waters of suppression and remind others that they too still have voices. What was once drowned can rise, but only if someone dares to disturb the silence. Voices drowned in stillness are not gone forever. They are waiting for the moment someone chooses honesty over safety, expression over submission. The obedient mind must learn that silence is not strength and stillness is not peace. True freedom begins when voices rise again, louder than the stillness that tried to bury them. The most powerful decisions are often the ones we never speak aloud. Silent choices are made when the obedient mind decides not to act, not to question, not to resist. These decisions leave no record, no announcement, no argument, yet their impact is enormous, shaping lives and futures in ways that go unnoticed. The tyranny lies in their invisibility. Choices unspoken are the hardest to challenge. Silent choices grow out of fear. A person hesitates to confront injustice, telling themselves it is safer to remain quiet. Another avoids honesty in a relationship, believing peace will be preserved. In these small silences, Choices are made, not with words, but with absence. Over time, silence becomes its own form of decision, and fear becomes its ruler. The obedient mind convinces itself that silence protects others. It tells itself that not speaking is an act of kindness or loyalty. But in reality, silence often protects power, not people. The tyrant thrives when voices go unraised, when choices remain hidden. What seems like selflessness is often surrender, and the cost of this surrender is freedom itself. In societies, silent choices shape history. When citizens choose not to resist oppressive laws, those laws gain strength. When communities choose not to challenge prejudice, discrimination becomes normalized. The silence of many creates the power of the few. History remembers the oppressors, but it also remembers the quiet obedience that made them possible. The tyranny of silent choices also erodes identity. When people bury their opinions, dreams, and truths, they begin to lose themselves. They appear agreeable, but beneath the surface lies frustration and emptiness. The self becomes fragmented, one part loyal to authority, the other screaming in silence. Identity dies slowly, not through conflict, but through quiet compliance. In families, silent choices ripple across generations. A child watches a parent remain silent in the face of injustice, learning that safety matters more than truth. That child grows into an adult who repeats the pattern, silencing themselves in their own household. Each silent choice becomes an inheritance, passed down like a hidden scar. Silent choices are rarely neutral. They always serve someone. When an employee chooses not to speak against corruption, the corrupt grow stronger. When a student chooses not to question misinformation, falsehoods spread. Silence may feel harmless, but it carries weight. Inaction is not emptiness. It is energy redirected to maintain the very system that silence avoids challenging. The tyranny lies in how silent choices multiply. One silence leads to another, until speaking feels impossible. The longer the obedient mind remains quiet, the heavier the silence grows. Eventually, silence is no longer a choice, but a prison. By then, the cost of breaking free feels unbearable, even though the silence itself is unbearable too. Yet even silent choices leave traces. Unease, guilt, and regret gnaw at the obedient mind. The spirit whispers that something was lost, even if no one else notices. These inner reminders are proof that silence does not erase responsibility, it only postpones it. The war within continues, pressing the individual to acknowledge what was left unsaid. Freedom begins when silent choices are recognized for what they are. Decisions with consequences as real as spoken ones. To break the tyranny, the obedient mind must learn to voice its truth, even when trembling. Every spoken word weakens silence's hold. Every honest choice challenges the tyranny of submission, and in that defiance, the mind begins to reclaim itself. Dreams are the purest expressions of the human spirit, but fear has a way of turning them into chains. Many people never pursue their deepest visions, not because they lack ability, but because fear convinces them those dreams are impossible. Fear whispers failure before the first step is even taken, and in that whisper entire futures collapse before they begin. The obedient mind becomes fertile ground for fear. It learns to shrink away from risk, to settle for what is safe rather than what is meaningful. Fear shackles ambition with invisible ropes, turning potential into hesitation. A dream that could have been a masterpiece remains an unpainted canvas, collecting dust in the silence of submission. Fear doesn't always appear as terror. Often it disguises itself as practicality, caution, or even wisdom. It says, "Be realistic," or "Don't aim too high." Yet beneath these masks, it carries the same message: do not try. The obedient mind accepts this message, believing it to be reason, when in truth it is nothing more than fear's restraint. Dreams are not only lost in silence, they are twisted into survival. Instead of asking, "What do I love?" the fearful mind asks, "What will keep me safe?" In this way, passion is replaced by necessity, creativity by conformity. Fear shackles dreams by convincing us that safety is success, even when it empties life of meaning. The tragedy of shackled dreams is not only what is lost to the dreamer, but what is stolen from the world. Every book never written, every invention never built, every song never sung is a gift withheld. Fear convinces individuals to silence themselves, but in doing so, it robs humanity of voices that might have changed history. Childhood is often the first place dreams are bound. A child who imagines great adventures is told to stop daydreaming. A child who envisions bold futures is reminded to be realistic. Fear is planted early, and as the child grows, the chains grow heavier. By adulthood, the dreamer forgets they ever had wings to begin with. In families, fear passes from one generation to the next. Parents who never pursued their dreams often discourage their children from doing so, masking their regret as advice. "Don't take risks," they say. "It's too dangerous." But what they really mean is, "I was afraid, and I want you to carry the same chains." Fear becomes a family heirloom. Workplaces reinforce these shackles. Employees with fresh ideas hesitate to share them, fearing rejection or ridicule. Innovators hold back, fearing failure. Dreams of change dissolve under the weight of conformity. Organizations appear efficient, but beneath the surface lie countless unspoken possibilities, each one shackled by fear of standing out. Fear also thrives in society's rules. Communities reward those who follow tradition and punish those who dare to dream differently. The dreamer who refuses to comply is labeled reckless or rebellious. Fear persuades people to conform not because it is right, but because it is easier. Shackled dreams keep societies predictable, but they also keep them stagnant. Even relationships can become cages for dreams. A partner afraid of conflict may discourage the other from pursuing bold ambitions. Friends may mock dreams to protect their own insecurities. The dreamer, desiring acceptance, buries their vision under fear of rejection. Love without support becomes another chain, binding the spirit instead of freeing it. The obedient mind learns to shrink from the unknown. Dreams require uncertainty, but fear convinces us uncertainty is danger. Every path not taken is a dream surrendered to fear's tyranny. Over time, the mind no longer even imagines, it learns to live small, not because it must, but because fear has made smallness feel safe. Yet dreams cannot be killed completely. Even when shackled, they whisper in the quiet moments, through envy of others, through restlessness, through the ache of dissatisfaction. These whispers are proof that fear never fully erases dreams. It only buries them. The dreamer may forget, but the spirit remembers. Fear shackles dreams by magnifying consequences. It tells us that failure will ruin everything, that mistakes will destroy us. But reality is far less cruel. Failure is often the teacher of courage, and mistakes are the builders of wisdom. The obedient mind, ruled by fear, never learns this truth. It stays chained to imagined catastrophes that never come. The cost of shackled dreams is measured not only in what is lost, but in what is endured. A person who abandons their dreams may live a life that looks comfortable, but inside they carry regret. Regret is the heaviest chain of all, for it grows with time, whispering, "What if?" long after opportunities are gone. Dreams also give birth to resilience. Those who pursue them, even in the face of fear, discover strength they never knew they had. Shackled dreams deny people this discovery by keeping ambition caged. Fear robs individuals of the chance to grow, to fall and rise, to become more than they imagined. Safety keeps them small, while risk would have made them strong. Fear convinces people that dreaming is selfish. It says, you must think of others, not yourself. But the truth is that unpursued dreams often harm others more. A parent who gives up on their vision teaches their child to settle. A leader who silences their ideas denies progress to their community. Shackled dreams weaken not just individuals, but everyone around them. Spirituality too suffers under fear. Faith is meant to inspire courage, but when it is tied to fear, it becomes another chain. People silence their dreams, thinking they are being humble or obedient, when in reality they are burying the gifts they were meant to share. Fear twists devotion into silence, shackling the soul instead of freeing it. The arts are one of the clearest examples of shackled dreams. How many paintings go unseen because an artist feared rejection? How many songs are never sung because a musician feared judgment? Creativity cannot thrive where fear rules. Each unshared creation is proof of how powerful fear is at binding the human spirit. Technology magnifies these shackles in new ways. Social media amplifies comparison, making dreamers afraid to begin unless they can be perfect. Algorithms reward conformity, discouraging voices that don't fit trends. Fear thrives in this environment, whispering, "You will be judged." And so countless dreams remain locked away in silence. The shackles of fear are not unbreakable, but they are heavy. Breaking them requires courage, not just once, but repeatedly. Every time a dreamer chooses action over fear, a link in the chain weakens. Fear never disappears, but it can be overcome. The choice to dream aloud is itself an act of rebellion. History is filled with examples of unshackled dreams. Every breakthrough, every movement, every revolution began with someone who refused to be silenced by fear. These individuals prove that fear's chains are illusions, strengthened only by compliance. Once challenged, they often break more easily than expected. Dreams, once freed, have power far greater than fear. On the personal level, freedom begins with a single step: writing down a dream, speaking it aloud, or taking the smallest action can begin to loosen fear's grip. Each step forward builds momentum, reminding the dreamer that the shackles were never as strong as they seemed. The battlefield of fear is won not in leaps, but in steady defiance. The obedient mind must learn that safety is not the same as life. A safe existence without dreams is a quiet death. Fear shackles dreams by convincing us that safety is worth any cost, but the cost is too high. To live without dreams is to live half a life, trapped in a cage of one's own making. Dreams shackled by fear represent the greatest tragedy of obedience. They are proof of potential denied, of futures surrendered, of voices muted. But they are also reminders that fear's power lies in silence. The moment a dream is spoken, the chain begins to break. Fear cannot survive in the presence of courage, and dreams cannot stay shackled forever. Obedience is often praised as a virtue, but in truth, it functions like a currency. It is traded, spent, and collected by those who benefit from control. Every time a person obeys without question, they make a payment, sometimes small, sometimes enormous. This hidden economy thrives in silence, and the obedient mind rarely realizes what it is giving away. The first thing obedience purchases is approval. A child who obeys wins praise from parents. An employee who complies gains recognition from managers. A citizen who follows the rules earns safety from authority. Approval seems valuable, but the cost is often individuality. The more approval one buys, the less freedom one has left. Obedience is also exchanged for security. People comply with orders to avoid punishment or conflict. Safety becomes the prize, but it is never free. Each time security is purchased, a piece of autonomy is surrendered. Over years, these small payments accumulate until freedom itself is bankrupt, traded entirely for the illusion of safety. The powerful understand this economy well. Leaders, institutions, and systems encourage obedience because it enriches them. They collect the compliance of the masses, like wealth, converting it into control. The more people pay in obedience, the more powerful authority becomes. It is a cycle where the rich in power grow richer, while the obedient grow poorer in spirit. In families, obedience is often demanded as loyalty. A child is told that questioning is betrayal, that obedience proves love. But this love is conditional, bought with silence. Over time, family bonds become less about genuine connection and more about transactions of obedience. The child learns that affection is earned by submission, not by truth. Schools reinforce the same trade. Students exchange obedience for grades, for approval, for the promise of future success. Creativity and curiosity, the real treasures of learning, are often devalued in this exchange. The obedient student may appear successful, but their currency has been spent on conformity, not discovery. Workplaces thrive on obedience as their primary economy. Employees trade compliance for promotions, salaries, and recognition. Those who question too much are labeled as difficult, and their currency loses value. Innovation dies in such economies because only obedience is rewarded. The cost is not only individual, it is the slow decay of progress itself. Even relationships become economies of obedience. Partners who demand control expect submission as proof of love. Friendships fracture when honesty is replaced by compliance. In these dynamics, people pay for acceptance by silencing their own needs. Over time, the relationship becomes less about connection and more about transactions of power. Obedience purchases peace, but the peace is temporary. People comply to avoid conflict, telling themselves it is easier, yet beneath the surface, resentment grows. Peace purchased with silence is fragile. It cracks easily under pressure. The true cost of this currency is a festering dissatisfaction that eventually erupts. Religion, when corrupted, turns obedience into its highest coin. Followers are told that devotion is proven through unquestioned compliance. Fear of punishment or hope of reward makes obedience seem priceless. But in this transaction, faith loses its essence. Instead of a journey of meaning, it becomes an economy of fear. The state often demands obedience as the ultimate payment for citizenship. Laws and rules, some just and others unjust, are upheld not only by force, but by compliance. Citizens pay daily with their silence, their submission, their unquestioned loyalty. Governments thrive on this steady income, using it to maintain structures of control. The tragedy is that the obedient mind rarely sees obedience as a trade. It believes obedience is free, that it costs nothing. But the truth is that every act of compliance is an exchange. The cost may not be visible immediately, but over time, the price becomes undeniable. Lost creativity, lost courage, lost freedom. Obedience also creates debt. People who comply too much feel indebted to authority. They believe they owe loyalty, gratitude, or silence to those who command them. This debt keeps them bound long after the original demand has ended. It is an invisible chain, tying individuals to systems they no longer need to serve. The most dangerous part of obedience as currency is its inflation. The more obedience is given, the less it seems to matter, and yet the more is demanded. What once was enough compliance no longer satisfies authority. The obedient mind must keep paying more, more silence, more submission, more of itself, until nothing remains. Fear acts as the banker in this economy. It enforces the transactions, ensuring that people continue to pay with their compliance. Fear whispers of punishment, loss, and isolation. It convinces the obedient mind that the cost of disobedience is too high. And so the mind pays and pays, never realizing that the bank of fear is bottomless. But not all obedience is worthless. There are times when compliance buys trust, cooperation, and safety for a greater good. The difference lies in choice. Chosen obedience is a conscious investment. Blind obedience is a hidden tax. The tragedy is that most obedience is blind, paid automatically, without awareness of its cost. The currency of obedience is also traded in silence between generations. Parents teach children to pay the same way they did, to value compliance over questioning. Generations grow up repeating the same transactions, believing them to be natural. This inheritance passes the chains of obedience like wealth, but it is wealth that weakens, not strengthens. Dreams are among the first things sold in this economy. People trade their ambitions for security, their visions for approval. A dreamer who once envisioned greatness learns to settle for obedience because it buys acceptance. The price of this trade is invisible at first, but it reveals itself later as regret, the cruelest debt of all. Obedience also purchases invisibility. People who comply blend into the background, safe from judgment or conflict, but in hiding, they lose themselves. Their identities blur until they are known only as followers, not as individuals. The cost of invisibility is that no one remembers the compliant, only the courageous. Authority thrives because obedience is paid in small increments. Few notice the cost of a single act of compliance. But over years, the total becomes staggering. Entire lives are spent in payment, traded piece by piece until nothing remains. The obedient mind believes it has lived safely, but in truth, it has lived impoverished. The wealth of obedience is unevenly distributed. Some collect it, growing powerful from the silence of others. Others spend it endlessly, growing weaker with each transaction. This imbalance sustains inequality, as the powerful accumulate control purchased by the obedience of the masses. The system survives not by force, but by trade. Yet even in this economy, resistance is possible. Refusal to pay, speaking truth, questioning authority, disobeying injustice becomes an act of economic rebellion. Each act of defiance weakens the system, reminding others that obedience is not free. The refusal to trade compliance is the beginning of freedom. Awareness is the first step to breaking this cycle. Once the obedient mind recognizes obedience as currency, it can choose when to spend and when to withhold. This shift transforms obedience from an unconscious payment into a conscious tool. Power begins to return to the individual, who no longer pays blindly. The ultimate lesson of obedience as currency is simple. Nothing is free. Every act of compliance has a cost. Every silence a price. To live fully is to decide carefully where to invest obedience and where to resist. Those who master this economy reclaim their wealth of freedom, refusing to bankrupt themselves for the sake of blind submission. Masks are the armor of obedience. They allow people to appear calm while hiding storms beneath the surface. Behind every polite nod, every forced smile, every quiet agreement lies a chorus of unsaid truths. These echoes beneath the mask are not silence. They are screams smothered by fear. The obedient mind wears masks so often that it forgets its true face. To survive in workplaces, families, and societies, it learns to conceal doubt, pain, or dissent. Yet what is hidden does not disappear. Each suppressed thought becomes an echo, bouncing within the self, waiting for release. The mask hides, but the echoes remind. Masks protect people from judgment. To wear one is to say, I am safe as long as I play the role expected of me. But this protection is fragile. The echoes beneath the mask grow louder over time, pressing against the thin surface. Eventually, the mask cracks, not because it fails, but because the spirit beneath refuses to stay silent. In families, masks are taught early. Children learn to hide their disappointment, their anger, their curiosity, to maintain harmony. Parents too wear masks, pretending to be strong when they feel broken. Beneath the mask, truths echo quietly, shaping relationships that appear whole but are hollowed by silence. Workplaces demand masks as part of survival. Employees wear them to appear agreeable, competent, or loyal. Leaders wear them to project confidence, even when uncertain. Beneath these professional disguises lies a flood of unspoken frustrations, ideas, and fears. The echoes remain trapped, shaping cultures where truth is replaced by performance. Society itself is a grand masquerade. People wear masks to fit into communities, traditions, and expectations. They suppress their identities to avoid exclusion. Yet beneath the mask, individuality echoes, whispering for recognition. The louder the society demands conformity, the louder the buried voices press against their cages. The obedient mind grows comfortable in its disguise. It convinces itself that the mask is part of who it is. But comfort does not erase the echoes. They return in restless nights, in private regrets, in the subtle ache of unfulfilled potential. The mask can cover the face, but not the soul. Masks often fracture identity. A person may wear one version at home, another at work, another in public. The self becomes divided, scattered across roles. Each fragment carries its own echo, and together they create dissonance. The obedient mind survives, but it does not live fully. It merely shifts masks to suit the moment. Art is often born from echoes beneath the mask. Writers, musicians, and painters release what they cannot speak through their creations. These works carry the weight of what was hidden, transforming echoes into beauty. Art becomes both confession and rebellion, proof that even masks cannot silence the deepest truths. Fear maintains the mask. Fear of rejection, punishment, or isolation convinces the mind to keep hiding. But fear also feeds the echoes. Every suppressed truth gains strength, becoming heavier with each silence. The obedient mind pays twice, once in submission and again in the weight of echoes it carries. The echoes beneath the mask are often contradictory. They hold both longing and fear, both defiance and shame. They confuse the obedient mind, which wonders why it feels restless despite appearing at peace. These contradictions are proof that masks cannot reconcile the complexity of the human spirit. They can only bury it. Relationships suffer most from hidden echoes. Partners who wear masks with one another lose intimacy. True connection requires honesty. But when honesty is traded for harmony, love becomes brittle. The echoes beneath the mask eventually seep through, not as confession, but as distance. What could have been shared becomes a barrier instead. The echoes beneath masks also shape entire generations. Children raised in silence inherit the same habits. They learn that truth must be hidden, that masks are safer than vulnerability. Generations live behind disguises, mistaking pretense for survival. The echoes pass down, unspoken yet powerful, shaping identities not yet born. Technology amplifies the culture of masks. Social media encourages people to present perfect versions of themselves, hiding struggle, doubt, and pain. Yet beneath these digital masks, Echoes grow louder than ever. Anxiety, comparison, and emptiness swell. The obedient mind plays its role online, while beneath the screen, its echoes multiply. The echoes cannot be silenced forever. They manifest in the body as stress, in the mind as anxiety, in the spirit as restlessness. What is buried always finds a way to rise. The mask protects temporarily, but the echoes demand release. They remind the self that authenticity is not optional, it is survival. The obedient mind fears authenticity because it risks exposure, but exposure is the only cure for echoes. To speak truth, to reveal the self, to drop the mask even briefly, is to let the echoes breathe. The sound may be uncomfortable, but it is cleansing. Silence poisons, expression heals. The mask also steals time. People spend years perfecting appearances, maintaining roles, and suppressing truth. Those years cannot be reclaimed. The echoes remind them of what could have been lived honestly. Each echo is a lost moment, a fragment of life exchanged for safety. The cost of obedience is counted in decades, not days. The echoes beneath masks often grow into rebellion. The self can only endure suppression for so long. Eventually, a moment arrives where the mask slips, and truth bursts out. These eruptions are messy, but they are necessary. They prove that beneath the obedient exterior lies a spirit still fighting for freedom. The breaking of masks is rarely celebrated. Society calls it weakness, failure, or betrayal. Yet it is in these breaks that authenticity emerges. The echoes beneath masks transform into voices once more, reminding the world that silence cannot last forever. Broken masks are not shameful. They are the beginning of truth. To live without a mask is to accept vulnerability. It is to allow others to see flaws, doubts, and truths. The obedient mind fears this exposure, but the spirit craves it, vulnerability. Silences echoes by transforming them into dialogue. What was once hidden becomes shared, and in sharing it loses its weight. Even in the darkest obedience, some refuse the mask. These individuals live authentically, even when it costs them comfort or approval. Their voices resonate louder because they carry no echoes. What they feel, they speak. They remind others that life behind masks is only half-life, and that freedom requires honesty. Echoes beneath masks are reminders of what has been lost, but also of what can be regained. They are not signs of failure, but of survival. The spirit refusing to disappear entirely. Each echo is a fragment of truth, calling to be acknowledged. Listening to them is the first step toward liberation. The journey beyond masks begins with small acts. Speaking an unpopular opinion, admitting fear, expressing vulnerability. These crack the surface. The echoes grow softer each time they are voiced. Gradually, the mask weakens, and the true self steps forward. Freedom is not in discarding masks all at once, but in daring to reveal truth piece by piece. The echoes beneath the mask are not curses, but calls. They are the reminders that obedience has a cost, and that silence is never complete. To answer them is to reclaim authenticity. To ignore them is to drown in regret. The choice belongs to each individual, to live behind the mask, or to let the echoes become a voice once more. Willpower is not usually shattered in one moment. It crumbles slowly, piece by piece, beneath the weight of silence and obedience. The collapse is quiet, invisible to others, and often unnoticed even by the one experiencing it. A person wakes one day realizing they no longer resist, no longer dream, no longer act. Their will has collapsed, not through battle, but through surrender. The obedient mind does not lose will suddenly. Instead, it is eroded by small decisions, staying quiet when speaking is needed, accepting when resisting is right, bowing when standing is possible. Each silence chips away at will until it becomes fragile. What once was a strong voice becomes a whisper that barely stirs. Fear is the chief architect of this collapse. It persuades the mind that risk is danger and courage is foolishness. Fear convinces the will that survival is more important than freedom, until the two are confused. Over time, fear does not need to shout. It only needs to remain present. Its weight is enough to bend willpower into submission. The collapse of will is disguised as peace. People appear calm, composed, and agreeable. Outsiders may even praise their discipline. But beneath the surface lies exhaustion. The stillness is not peace, but paralysis. When will collapses, people stop choosing entirely, mistaking the absence of resistance for serenity. In families, this collapse is normalized. Generations are taught to obey elders, to keep traditions, to avoid confrontation. Children learn early that willpower is dangerous if it challenges authority. By adulthood, they are experts at surrender. The collapse is no accident. It is inheritance, passed down like an heirloom of silence. Workplaces, too, demand the quiet collapse of will. Employees are rewarded for compliance, not for defiance. Those who question are silenced or removed, while those who obey are promoted. Over time, workers learn that their will is not valued. Ambition collapses into routine, and creativity dissolves into protocol. The workplace thrives, but the individual spirit withers. The collapse of will is most tragic in relationships. When one partner continually silences their needs to keep peace, their will fades. They stop asking, stop resisting, stop expressing. The relationship may endure, but it becomes hollow, held together by one person's silence rather than mutual respect. Love without willpower is dependency, not connection. Society often praises submission as discipline. Citizens are told that loyalty to the state is noble, that obedience ensures safety. Over time, national pride becomes indistinguishable from personal surrender. The quiet collapse of will creates nations of silence, where injustice thrives because no one dares to resist. The silence appears patriotic, but it is really resignation. The collapse is not dramatic. It is gradual. It begins with hesitation, grows into avoidance, and ends in silence. The person no longer believes their voice matters, so they stop offering it. The will collapses not from a single blow, but from 1,000 unspoken words. What is lost is not strength, but belief in the right to use it. Religion, when distorted, accelerates the collapse. Followers are told that questioning equals rebellion, that faith demands silence. They stop trusting their conscience, believing obedience is holiness. In this surrender, their will collapses, replaced by ritual and fear. Spirituality becomes a cage, not a guide. The collapse is disguised as devotion. The body reflects the collapse of will. Stress, exhaustion, and illness emerge when the mind surrenders. People lose vitality, carrying heaviness that cannot be explained. The echoes of silence settle into muscles and bones. What the will refuses to fight, the body bears as burden. The collapse is written not only in the mind, but in flesh. Dreams are the first victims. When will collapses, dreams vanish quietly. People no longer aim high. They aim only for survival. The spark that once inspired ambition becomes dim. Life turns into repetition, each day indistinguishable from the next. The collapse of will ensures that the extraordinary is never attempted, only imagined. The collapse is also reinforced by culture. Societies that value conformity teach that silence is noble and questioning is shameful. Children grow up believing that to surrender is to belong. Their will collapses before it fully develops, shaped into obedience before it has a chance to rebel. What is praised as respect is really suppression. Technology amplifies the collapse. Endless streams of distraction dull the mind, making willpower unnecessary. Instead of resisting or questioning, people consume passively. The will is not crushed by force, but by constant noise. The collapse is not violent, but numbing, a slow surrender to convenience and comfort. The collapse of will is seductive because it feels safe. Resistance requires energy, but surrender offers ease. People convince themselves that silence is wisdom, that inaction is patience. Yet what appears restful is really decay. The will cannot survive without exercise, and silence is the slow poison that weakens it. The obedient mind believes collapse is permanent. It thinks once the will is gone, it cannot return. But this is fear's lie. Even the faintest spark of resistance can reignite willpower. The collapse may be quiet, but the recovery can be loud. Every act of defiance is a stone laid in rebuilding the foundation of will. The collapse of will spreads like contagion. When one person surrenders, others follow. Silence is normalized, and soon entire groups collapse together. A workplace, a family, or a community can crumble without ever raising a protest. The cost is collective. The collapse of many creates the strength of the few who command them. But echoes always remain, even in the most obedient mind. Fragments of will whisper beneath the silence. They emerge in envy, in regret, in dreams that refuse to die. These whispers are reminders that collapse is not annihilation. The will is not destroyed. It is buried. To listen is to begin the process of revival. Recovery begins with small acts, a question spoken aloud, a refusal to comply, a truth admitted despite fear. These are the bricks of resistance. Each small act strengthens will, proving that collapse is not the end. The quiet surrender of years can be undone by consistent defiance. Willpower, once thought dead, rises stronger. The collapse of will is dangerous, not only to the individual, but to humanity. Progress depends on those who resist, who question, who dare. When will collapses, innovation halts, justice dies, and creativity disappears. The obedient mind does not realize that its surrender feeds stagnation. The cost of collapse is borne by all. The collapse is rarely recognized because it is normalized. People call it maturity, realism, or discipline. They admire obedience without seeing the death behind it. The collapse of will hides beneath praise, making it harder to confront. What is admired is actually decay, disguised as virtue. History remembers those who resisted, not those who collapsed quietly. Tyrannies fall because some refuse to surrender their will. Every revolution, every reform, every transformation begins with someone who refuses silence. The collapse of will builds empires of obedience, but the strength of a single unbroken will can shatter them. The obedient mind must learn that survival is not enough. To live without will is to exist in shadow, not in light. The collapse may feel inevitable, but it is not destiny. Each choice to question, each refusal to obey blindly strengthens the will. Survival is instinct, but resistance is life. The quiet collapse of will is humanity's greatest danger. It does not make noise. It does not leave scars. It leaves emptiness. A life lived without will is a life lived without self. The collapse is not the end of the world, but it is the end of a person's world. To resist it is to reclaim existence itself. Silence is often seen as harmless, but it is one of the most powerful shields for secrets. What is left unspoken hides truths that could dismantle lies or expose corruption. The obedient mind is taught that silence equals loyalty, but in reality, it becomes the perfect protector of secrets that should never have been kept. Secrets thrive in silence because words are their natural enemy. The moment truth is spoken, the secret begins to die. But as long as silence reigns, the secret grows stronger, wrapping itself around the lives of those who guard it. The obedient mind may believe it is protecting others, but it is often protecting the chains that bind them. In families, silence is used to cover wounds that never heal. Abuse, betrayal, or dysfunction is hidden beneath polite smiles and unspoken rules. Children grow up learning not to mention what everyone knows, and in doing so, they carry secrets into adulthood. The silence becomes tradition, and the secrets live on for generations. Workplaces also rely on silence to protect their darkest truths. Corruption, exploitation, and discrimination are rarely shouted from rooftops. They are buried in silence. Employees who speak risk their careers, while those who remain quiet are rewarded with safety. The secret survives not because it is unknown, but because silence makes it untouchable. Societies are built on collective silences. Histories of injustice, oppression, or violence are often edited or erased, leaving only a curated version of truth. The obedient masses comply, repeating the story as told, never daring to question the omissions. The silence of many protects the secrets of the powerful, ensuring they are never fully exposed. Religions, when twisted, weaponize silence to guard their flaws. Followers are told that questioning is blasphemy, that loyalty requires submission. Silence protects the secrets of leaders who exploit faith for control. The cost is not only individual honesty, but the corruption of spirituality itself, hidden beneath a mask of devotion. The obedient mind convinces itself that silence is noble. It whispers, "This is not my place," or it will only cause harm if spoken. In this way, silence disguises itself as wisdom, yet every unspoken truth becomes a secret that thrives. What appears as strength is often compliance, and what appears as protection is really imprisonment. Secrets protected by silence eventually become burdens. The person who keeps them feels the weight pressing heavier each day. What is not spoken lives in the body, manifesting as stress, anxiety, or exhaustion. Silence may protect secrets outwardly, but inwardly it corrodes the spirit, turning the keeper into a prisoner of their own silence. Children are especially vulnerable to secrets carried in silence. They sense what is unspoken, even if they cannot name it. The tension in the home, the hidden truths, the unaddressed pain, all echo in their developing minds. They learn that silence is safer than truth, and so the cycle continues. The secret grows, inherited silently. In politics, silence protects secrets of war, corruption, or betrayal. Citizens are fed curated information, while the truth lies buried. Whistleblowers who dare to speak are punished, ensuring silence remains the default. The obedient citizen plays their part, not realizing that their compliance is the strongest shield the secret has. Even personal secrets are shaped by silence. People hide parts of themselves, desires, doubts, mistakes, believing others will not accept them. The silence protects them from judgment, but also isolates them. What begins as self-preservation becomes self-erasure. The secret is kept, but so is the self, locked away from the world. Silence also guards cultural wounds. Societies scarred by colonialism, inequality, or injustice often avoid speaking of them openly. Leaders declare the past settled, urging silence in the name of unity. Yet the unspoken pain festers, passed through generations. Silence protects the secret, but the wound remains open, healing never allowed to begin. The obedient mind often thinks silence spares conflict, but in truth, it spares injustice. Every time silence shields a secret, it denies accountability. Harm continues, not because no one knows, but because no one dares to speak. Silence becomes the accomplice, the secret's strongest ally. The silence surrounding secrets is rarely absolute. Whispers leak, rumors spread, subtle clues appear. These echoes are reminders that truth resists burial. Yet without courage, the whispers remain whispers, never breaking into voice. Secrets survive not because they are unbreakable, but because whispers are never allowed to grow louder. Art often becomes the unintentional betrayer of secrets. Pain hidden in silence finds its way into poetry, painting, or song. Artists reveal what they cannot say directly, smuggling truth through metaphor. In this way, art becomes rebellion, breaking silence without naming names. The secret weakens each time it is transformed into expression. Technology makes secrets harder to protect, yet easier to silence. Information leaks quickly, but censorship spreads just as fast. Those who hold power adapt, using silence not by absence, but by overwhelming voices with distraction. Secrets survive in the flood, hidden in plain sight, as the obedient mind fails to search deeper. The weight of secrets grows unbearable over time. What once seemed small becomes overwhelming in its silence. People who keep secrets often long for release, yet fear keeps them quiet. This internal war breaks spirits, fractures identities, and leaves scars invisible to others. The silence that protects also destroys. Silence convinces communities that they are united. We all agree, they say, because no one speaks against it. Yet this agreement is false, built on countless secrets each person guards. The community appears strong, but beneath the surface lies tension ready to erupt. Secrets cannot hold forever, no matter how strong the silence. Breaking silence is rarely easy. Those who speak often face punishment, rejection, or isolation, yet they also find freedom. The secret loses its grip the moment truth is spoken aloud. What once seemed impossible becomes liberating. Breaking silence costs dearly, but keeping it costs more. The obedient mind fears exposure, believing secrets must remain hidden, but exposure is what destroys the chains. Once the truth is revealed, it can be addressed, healed, or challenged. Silence protects, but it also prolongs pain. Speaking turns secrets from curses into opportunities for change. Secrets often rely on shame to maintain silence. People believe their truth is too ugly to share, too dangerous to reveal. Yet shame weakens in the light. What once felt unbearable becomes bearable when spoken. The secret was never as heavy as the silence used to protect it. Even when silence ends, the damage of secrets lingers. Trust may be broken, wounds reopened, lives reshaped. Yet even this is better than the endless decay of silence. Healing begins not with hiding, but with confrontation. Secrets exposed are painful, but secrets protected by silence are deadly. The greatest tragedy of silence is that it convinces people they are alone. Each person hides their secret, not realizing others do the same. If they spoke, they would find solidarity. But silence divides, isolating people with burdens that could have been shared. Secrets survive not because they are unique, but because silence convinces us they are. Silence protects not the innocent, but the guilty. It guards systems of power, habits of abuse, and structures of control. The obedient mind must realize that every time it chooses silence, it strengthens the secret. The only way to weaken it is to speak, to reveal, to resist. Secrets that silence protects will always demand a cost. They consume energy, fracture relationships, and erode identity. The obedient may believe they are buying peace, but they are only renting it, and the price grows higher each day. True peace cannot be purchased with silence. It can only be found in truth. Thought is meant to be free, to wander, to question, to imagine. But in the obedient mind, thought becomes shackled, locked inside invisible walls built by fear, authority, and habit. A prisoner rarely knows the full size of their cell. So too does the mind adapt to its cage, convincing itself that confinement is freedom. The prison of thought is built subtly. It begins when questions are discouraged, when curiosity is punished, when answers are provided without room for doubt. Over time, the mind learns to stop wandering. Its cell is not guarded by soldiers, but by self-imposed silence, a jail reinforced by the very prisoner it confines. Fear acts as the iron bars of this prison. Fear of rejection, failure, or punishment keeps thoughts from escaping. Even when an idea rattles the cage, fear convinces the mind it is safer to stay still. The prison does not need locks when fear is strong enough to keep the door closed. Authority acts as the warden. Parents, teachers, bosses, and leaders all reinforce the boundaries of acceptable thought. They reward compliance and punish dissent, teaching that safety lies within the cell. The obedient mind comes to see the warden not as an oppressor, but as a protector, confusing control with care. The walls of this prison are often made of tradition. Customs and cultural expectations dictate what can be thought, what must remain unchallenged. Generations pass down these walls, each reinforcing the boundaries. What was once a belief becomes law, and what was once law becomes unquestionable truth. The prison expands, yet remains invisible. Inside this prison, imagination shrinks. Dreams become distorted into what is acceptable rather than what is possible. The child who once thought boldly grows into the adult who only thinks safely. Imagination, once limitless, now paces within the walls like a caged animal, restless but unable to escape. The most dangerous part of thought's imprisonment is its quietness. Unlike physical prisons, there are no guards shouting, no locks clanging shut. Instead, there is silence. The obedient mind does not notice the moment it surrenders its freedom. It only realizes much later, when the cell feels too natural to question. Thoughts that try to escape often return disguised as guilt. A rebellious idea arises. What if I resist? What if I disobey? But the mind quickly punishes itself. It whispers, "That's wrong, that's dangerous." The prison does not need chains when shame is enough to bind. Self-censorship becomes the cruelest form of confinement. The prison of thought weakens individuality. When everyone thinks alike, not by choice, but by force, identity blurs. People stop forming original ideas, instead recycling the same approved beliefs. Individuality, the essence of freedom, becomes another casualty of obedience. The prison does not erase thought, it clones it. In families, this prison begins early. A child told never to question learns that obedience is safer than curiosity. The home becomes the first cell, decorated with love but enforced with silence. The child grows up, not realizing their thoughts were locked away before they ever learned to use them fully. In schools, the prison becomes larger. Education should be the key to unlocking thought, but too often it becomes another lock. Students memorize rather than question, repeat rather than create. The prison is disguised as learning, and the obedient student is praised even as their mind remains confined. Workplaces reinforce the prison walls. Employees are encouraged to stay in their lane, to follow rules without question. Innovation requires freedom, but obedience demands silence. The workplace thrives on efficiency, but efficiency without thought is stagnation. The prison of thought produces good workers, but prevents great thinkers. Religion, when twisted, adds another layer to the cell. Faith, which should inspire exploration, is turned into obedience. Followers are told to believe without question, to silence doubt as sin. Thought becomes chained to doctrine, unable to wander into deeper understanding. The prison is called devotion, but it is confinement nonetheless. Society as a whole benefits from thought's imprisonment. Governments, institutions, and systems flourish when people do not think critically. Obedience fuels stability, and silence maintains order. But this stability is fragile, for it relies on people remaining prisoners forever. Once thoughts begin to escape, the system begins to tremble. The prison of thought is not absolute. Even within its walls, whispers remain. Doubt, curiosity, and imagination still stir in the corners. These are the cracks in the prison, the reminders that freedom has not been fully destroyed. The obedient mind may silence them, but the echoes persist, waiting for a chance to break free. The cost of this prison is enormous. Entire lives are lived without originality, creativity, or courage. People survive, but they do not live. Their days are filled with repetition, their choices shaped by fear. The prisoner of thought does not starve, but neither do they feast. They exist in a constant state of quiet deprivation. Breaking free requires awareness. A prisoner cannot escape a cell they cannot see. The obedient mind must first recognize the boundaries of its own silence. To ask, "Why do I believe this?" or "Who benefits from my silence?" is to press against the walls. The first step to freedom is realizing there is a cage. The act of escape is never easy. Authority punishes rebellion, fear punishes courage, and tradition punishes change. The prisoner of thought must endure ridicule, isolation, and rejection. Yet each step outside the walls strengthens the spirit. The mind, once confined, discovers its true power in the very act of defiance. Even when escape begins, the prison lingers. Years of obedience leave scars. Doubt whispers, "Are you sure? Should you return?" The walls are not only external, but internal. True freedom comes not only from leaving the prison, but from refusing to rebuild it in the mind. Liberation requires persistence as much as courage. History shows the danger of thought imprisoned. Atrocities thrive not only because of tyrants, but because of masses who surrendered their minds. Citizens who silenced their questions became accomplices. The prison of thought does not only trap individuals, it enslaves societies. Freedom dies not with a bang, but with a quiet surrender of ideas. Art, once again, becomes a key. Artists expose prisons by expressing what others are too afraid to say. A song, a poem, or a painting can break walls that lectures cannot. The imprisoned mind may not speak, but it can feel the truth in art. Each piece of creation becomes a reminder that thought longs to be free. Technology offers both bars and keys. It drowns people in distraction, numbing their capacity for deep thought. Yet it also connects them to ideas beyond their own walls. Used unconsciously, it strengthens the prison. Used wisely, it can shatter it. The choice lies in awareness, in whether the prisoner uses the tool or the tool uses the prisoner. The greatest resistance to thought's imprisonment is courage to speak. Every question asked aloud weakens the silence. Every idea shared breaks another chain. Courage does not guarantee safety, but it guarantees possibility. A prisoner who dares to speak has already widened the cracks in their cell. The obedient mind may believe the prison protects them. It whispers that silence avoids conflict, that obedience avoids pain. But this protection is an illusion. The prison keeps out danger, yes, but it also keeps out growth, love, and discovery. The walls protect nothing but the comfort of stagnation. The prison of thought eventually leads to regret. People look back on their lives and realize they never truly lived. They followed rules, avoided risks, and obeyed commands, but they never thought freely. Regret becomes the ghost of what could have been, haunting the prisoner long after the cage has rusted away. When thought becomes a prisoner, humanity itself suffers. Innovation, progress, and justice rely on minds that dare to think freely. Without them, societies grow stagnant, cultures grow brittle, and individuals live half-lives. The prison may be silent, but its consequences are loud. To resist is not only personal, it is universal. Freedom begins the moment thought refuses silence. To break the prison is to reclaim humanity's most powerful gift, the ability to imagine, to question, to create. The obedient mind may live safely within walls, but the liberated mind soars. The choice remains to live as a prisoner of thought, or to risk everything for freedom of mind. Peace is one of humanity's greatest desires, but not all peace is true. Some peace is borrowed, bought at the cost of silence, submission, or compromise. It appears calm on the surface, yet beneath it lies a storm of unspoken truths. Borrowed peace soothes temporarily, but its cost is heavy, and it always comes due. The obedient mind seeks borrowed peace because it fears conflict. It chooses harmony over honesty, quiet over confrontation. In the moment, this seems wise. Yet every silence given to preserve peace is an investment in future unrest. What is avoided now will return later, magnified by the weight of time. In families, borrowed peace is common. Arguments are avoided, truths are hidden, wounds are ignored. On the outside, the family looks united. Inside, resentment festers. The cost of this peace is intimacy, for true closeness cannot survive where silence builds walls. What is borrowed is not peace, but delay. Workplaces thrive on borrowed peace. Employees stay silent about unfair treatment, fearing conflict with authority. Leaders pretend issues do not exist to maintain order. Productivity may seem strong, but beneath the surface, dissatisfaction builds. Eventually, the peace collapses, often with explosive consequences. Borrowed peace is the currency of dysfunction. Societies borrow peace through injustice. Laws are left unchallenged, corruption ignored, oppression tolerated. Citizens accept calm streets, even if silence hides suffering. But history proves that borrowed peace always collapses. What is buried erupts in revolutions, uprisings, or unrest. Peace sustained by silence is no peace at all. Religion, when distorted, uses borrowed peace to control. Followers are told to remain silent, to obey, to accept. They trade their questions for belonging, their doubts for unity. The peace within the community seems strong, but it comes at the cost of truth. Faith becomes performance, and authenticity dies behind borrowed calm. Borrowed peace also rules personal relationships. Partners avoid difficult conversations, telling themselves they are protecting love. Friends ignore betrayals to maintain harmony. Yet beneath the quiet lies a fracture. Every silence deepens the divide, until one day the relationship breaks completely. Peace borrowed is peace postponed. The cost of borrowed peace is authenticity. People who silence themselves lose the ability to live truthfully. They hide their needs, desires, and pain behind a mask of compliance. The world may applaud their calmness, but inside they feel invisible. What they keep is quiet, but what they lose is themselves. Fear convinces people that borrowed peace is safer than truth. It whispers, don't speak, don't resist, don't risk. And so, they comply. But safety built on silence is fragile. Fear does not preserve peace. It only delays conflict. When the storm finally comes, it is stronger because of all the times it was ignored. Borrowed peace also costs opportunity. A workplace that avoids conflict cannot innovate. A society that ignores injustice cannot progress. A relationship that avoids truth cannot grow. What appears peaceful is actually stagnant, stuck in place by silence. The true cost of borrowed peace is lost potential. Even health pays the price. Suppressed conflict manifests as stress, anxiety, or illness. The body carries what the mouth will not speak. Borrowed peace may protect relationships or jobs, but it erodes well-being. The cost is not visible at first, but it grows heavier with time until the body breaks under the silence. Children raised in borrowed peace inherit its scars. They watch parents avoid honesty, learning that silence is survival. They grow into adults who repeat the same patterns, carrying forward a legacy of unresolved conflict. Borrowed peace teaches them that calmness is more important than truth, and so the cycle continues. Borrowed peace is seductive because it feels immediate. Conflict requires effort, courage, and discomfort, but silence offers instant calm. People convince themselves that avoiding the storm is strength, yet this calm is deceptive. It is not resolution but retreat. The storm does not disappear. It gathers strength in silence. The cost of borrowed peace is also measured in creativity. True expression requires honesty, but silence suffocates imagination. Artists, thinkers, and dreamers who bury their truths for peace lose their voice. Their work becomes hollow, safe but meaningless. Peace borrowed kills the very fire that fuels creation. Authority thrives on borrowed peace. Leaders reward citizens who remain quiet, calling them loyal. Institutions praise employees who avoid dissent, calling them team players. But this peace is nothing more than obedience. Authority grows stronger, not because it is just, but because silence protects it. The cost is freedom itself. Borrowed peace erodes trust. When people avoid speaking truth, others sense it. They feel the distance, the dishonesty, even if they cannot name it. Relationships built on silence cannot endure. Trust requires truth, and peace purchased with silence destroys both. What is left is fragile connection that crumbles under pressure. The collapse of borrowed peace is inevitable. No silence can hold forever. Eventually, truths spill out through anger, rebellion, or collapse. The longer peace is borrowed, the higher the cost when it breaks. What could have been solved early with honesty becomes catastrophic when buried for years. Borrowed peace convinces people they are moral. They believe they are protecting others, keeping harmony, avoiding harm. But in truth, they are protecting themselves from discomfort. This false morality disguises cowardice as compassion. The cost is not only personal, it spreads harm to everyone silenced by their compliance. The obedient mind must learn to distinguish between real peace and borrowed peace. Real peace comes from resolution, from honesty, from truth faced directly. Borrowed peace comes from avoidance, from silence, from fear. The two may look similar, but their costs are worlds apart. The tragedy is that borrowed peace often feels like victory. The argument avoided, the tension dissolved, the calm restored. Yet victory won by surrender is not victory at all. It is defeat disguised as quiet. Borrowed peace tricks the mind into believing it has triumphed when it has only given away freedom. Borrowed peace also imprisons the spirit. People who silence themselves too long forget what their true voice sounds like. They live as shadows, present in body, but absent in essence. Life becomes a performance of calmness, while inside they long for truth. The cost of borrowed peace is the death of authenticity. Yet even borrowed peace cannot kill truth completely. The unspoken remains alive, pressing against silence, regret, guilt, and restlessness. Remind the mind of what was lost. These reminders are painful, but they are also hope. They prove that even buried truths still live, waiting to be freed. Breaking from borrowed peace requires courage. Speaking the hidden words, confronting the ignored truths, daring to disturb the calm. These acts shatter silence. The peace may break, but in its breaking comes freedom. True peace cannot be borrowed. It must be built, brick by brick, with honesty. The cost of borrowed peace is too high. It robs individuals of authenticity, families of intimacy, societies of justice, and humanity of progress. What is borrowed today becomes debt tomorrow. Only truth can settle the account. Borrowed peace is not peace at all. It is silence, and silence always demands payment. Control often appears solid, like stone walls or iron chains. But when examined closely, much of it is only a shadow, a phantom given power by obedience. What seems immovable is often sustained only by silence and fear. To unmask the phantom of control is to realize that its power exists only because we believe in it. The phantom thrives on perception. People assume authority has absolute strength, but most of its power lies in compliance. The obedient mind convinces itself it has no choice but to obey. In truth, the phantom cannot act without willing subjects. Control is less a force and more a performance, kept alive by belief. Fear is the mask the phantom wears best. It projects punishment, rejection, or chaos to those who resist. Yet often, these threats are illusions. The mind imagines consequences far worse than reality. The phantom of control does not need to act. It only needs people to fear what might happen if they disobey. In families, the phantom takes the form of authority, unquestioned. Parents, elders, or partners impose rules that are followed without reflection. Their power seems natural, inevitable. But when challenged, much of this authority proves fragile. The phantom's strength lies not in truth, but in tradition accepted blindly. Workplaces cloak the phantom in professionalism. Employees comply with toxic leadership because they fear losing their jobs. Leaders maintain control through appearances of power, yet they depend entirely on silence. The phantom in business collapses the moment workers recognize their collective strength. What looked immovable falls when unity rises. Societies are haunted by the phantom in laws and governments. Citizens comply with unjust rules because they believe resistance is impossible. Yet history proves otherwise. Every revolution unmasks the phantom, revealing that regimes fell not because they were strong, but because the people withdrew their obedience. The phantom dissolves in the light of refusal. Religion, when twisted, sustains the phantom through sacred disguise. Believers obey not because leaders are divine, but because silence convinces them they must be. Questioning is buried, doubt condemned, obedience praised. Yet the moment a believer reclaims their conscience, the phantom loses its mask. True faith survives. Control does not. The phantom of control also hides within relationships. One partner demands submission, and the other complies to avoid conflict. This dynamic appears stable, but it is an illusion. The controlling partner's power exists only because the other accepts it. The moment resistance emerges, the phantom's hold weakens. Masks of control are reinforced by culture. People are told to respect authority, honor tradition, and obey leaders without question. Control becomes normalized, even celebrated. Yet beneath the mask lies nothing more than repetition, a pattern kept alive by compliance. Once questioned, the phantom unravels, exposing its hollow core. The obedient mind rarely notices the phantom's weakness. It believes control is permanent, failing to see its reliance on silence. Every act of obedience reinforces the illusion. The phantom thrives not because it is strong, but because it convinces the mind not to test its strength. In truth, its foundation is fragile. The phantom also survives in guilt. People obey not only out of fear, but because they feel morally obligated. They convince themselves resistance is wrong, selfish, or sinful. Yet this morality is often constructed by authority itself, another mask of control. To unmask it requires asking whose interests guilt serves. Technology gives the phantom new disguises. Algorithms, surveillance, and curated information create a sense of control over thought. People censor themselves, assuming they are watched, even when they are not. The phantom thrives in this uncertainty. Its strength lies not in actual force, but in the belief that force is always present. The phantom of control whispers that peace requires submission. It convinces people that resisting will bring chaos, while obedience will preserve order. Yet real peace cannot exist without freedom. What the phantom offers is not peace, but stagnation, a quiet maintained by silence rather than truth. To unmask the phantom, one must test it. Speaking truth, resisting a command, or questioning authority often reveals its fragility. What seemed indestructible falters under scrutiny. The phantom's greatest fear is exposure, because exposure strips away the illusions that sustain it. Sunlight dissolves shadows. Art has long been a weapon against the phantom. Writers, musicians, and thinkers reveal control's illusions through expression. A single story can pierce the mask, reminding people that they are not alone in their doubts. Art turns whispers into shouts, weakening the phantom by showing that silence is not universal. The phantom also collapses when solidarity emerges, alone. A single person feels powerless. Together, voices expose the illusion. Movements throughout history demonstrate this. When enough people stop believing in control, it ceases to exist. The phantom cannot withstand collective resistance. It disappears when belief is withdrawn en masse. Even in personal lives, the phantom loses power when challenged. An employee who refuses unfair demands discovers the boss has less strength than imagined. A citizen who questions authority finds cracks in its foundation. A child who challenges tradition realizes not all rules are sacred. Each act of defiance pulls away another mask. The phantom of control persists because it is comfortable. Many prefer the illusion to the uncertainty of freedom. The obedient mind fears what happens when the phantom is gone. Who will decide? Who will guide? But freedom requires the courage to step into uncertainty, to accept responsibility for choices once surrendered. The phantom also disguises itself as stability. People fear chaos more than oppression, so they accept control as necessary. Yet this stability is brittle. It holds only as long as silence is maintained. Once cracks appear, the phantom collapses quickly, revealing that its stability was never real, only borrowed. The cost of believing in the phantom is freedom lost. Entire lives are lived in obedience, never realizing the control was an illusion. People give away their voices, their choices, their power to shadows. The phantom grows fat on their silence, while they shrink inside their cages. Unmasking the phantom requires courage to face fear directly. The moment one asks, "What if this power is not real?" the mask begins to slip. Each doubt weakens the illusion. Each question tears at the disguise. Control relies on silence. The act of questioning is its undoing. The phantom of control cannot be destroyed completely, for it adapts every time one mask is removed. Another may appear, but awareness is armor. Once people recognize the phantom's tricks, they are less likely to surrender blindly. They may still obey, but now they understand the cost, and sometimes they choose differently. The phantom of control survives only as long as it is believed in. It has no substance of its own, no power without obedience. To unmask it is to see that the chains were never locked, that the cage was never sealed. The phantom fades in the light of truth, leaving only freedom behind. Control is often nothing more than a shadow cast by fear, tradition, and silence. It is not the strength of the phantom that enslaves people, but their belief in its reality. The moment belief is withdrawn, the phantom vanishes and freedom returns. To unmask it is to reclaim what was always ours. Freedom is not reached in one leap. It is built step by step through choices that reclaim what silence and fear once stole. The unchained self does not emerge suddenly, but grows through small acts of defiance. Each step forward weakens the grip of obedience, until the chains that once felt permanent begin to fall away. The first step is awareness. To see the chains is to recognize their existence. The obedient mind often mistakes silence for peace and obedience for safety. But once awareness breaks through, the illusion dissolves. The unchained self begins the journey not with action, but with sight. Seeing the prison is the start of escape. The second step is questioning. Questions disturb the silence, pressing against the walls of control. Why must I obey? Who benefits from my silence? What do I lose by complying? These questions are weapons, cutting through the illusions of authority. Each question is a crack in the chains, reminding the self that freedom begins in thought. The third step is courage. Awareness without action leaves the chains intact. Courage is the force that moves the self from recognition to rebellion. It does not mean fear disappears. It means fear is faced. Courage is the key that fits into the lock, turning resistance into possibility. The fourth step is voice. To speak what was once hidden is to claim ownership of truth. The unchained self learns to express needs, desires, and doubts without apology. Voice breaks the silence that protects obedience. Every word spoken is a declaration that the chains no longer define the self. The fifth step is refusal. To say no is to resist the economy of obedience. Each refusal reclaims autonomy, proving that compliance is not inevitable. The obedient mind fears refusal, but the unchained self embraces it. Refusal transforms silence into action, strengthening the spirit with every act of defiance. The sixth step is authenticity. Masks fall away as the self chooses honesty over pretense. The unchained person no longer lives for approval, but for truth. Authenticity restores wholeness, healing the fractures created by obedience. To live authentically is to live without chains, even when it costs comfort. The seventh step is reclaiming dreams. Fear once shackled ambition, convincing the obedient mind to settle, but the unchained self dares to dream boldly again. Dreams are no longer luxuries. They are necessities. Each pursuit of passion is a step toward freedom, proving that the self was never born to be caged. The eighth step is breaking silence for others. Liberation is not only personal, it is collective. The unchained self speaks not just for itself, but for those still bound. By refusing silence, it creates space for others to rise. Freedom multiplies when voices join together, forming a chorus stronger than any chain. The ninth step is resistance to shame. Obedience often survives because people feel guilty for resisting. Shame whispers that rebellion is selfish, that truth is betrayal. The unchained self refuses this lie, embracing resistance as necessary. To reject shame is to reclaim the dignity obedience once denied. The 10th step is embracing conflict. The obedient mind avoids it, mistaking silence for harmony. But the unchained self understands that conflict is not destruction, it is growth. Honest confrontation clears the air, exposing truths buried by silence. Conflict becomes a tool of freedom, not a threat to it. The 11th step is solidarity. Chains are heaviest when carried alone. The unchained self learns to connect with others who resist, forming bonds of strength. Together, they dismantle systems that thrive on obedience. Solidarity turns individual defiance into collective power, making freedom unstoppable. The 12th step is reclaiming time. Obedience consumes years, demanding silence in exchange for borrowed peace. The unchained self refuses to waste time on submission. Every moment becomes an investment in authenticity, creativity, and truth. Time once lost to chains is now spent building a life worth living. The 13th step is self-trust. The obedient mind doubts itself, relying on authority for direction, but the unchained self listens inward, trusting intuition and conscience. This trust transforms hesitation into confidence. Self-trust is the foundation of freedom, for no one can chain a mind that believes in itself. The 14th step is unlearning. Obedience is often taught, passed down through culture and family. The unchained self challenges these lessons, discarding traditions that serve control. Unlearning is not betrayal, but liberation, making space for new truths to flourish. To unlearn is to tear away the roots of the chains. The 15th step is reclaiming the body. Chains do not only bind thoughts, they weigh on flesh. Stress, fatigue, and illness grow in silence. The unchained self listens to the body, releasing the burdens of suppression. Movement, rest, and expression become acts of resistance, proving that even the body can be freed. The 16th step is choosing courage daily. Freedom is not a single act, but a practice. Each day presents new chains to resist, new silences to break. The unchained self understands that courage is not permanent. It must be chosen again and again. Every choice strengthens the habit of freedom. The 17th step is forgiving the past. The obedient mind carries regret for years of silence, but regret itself can become another chain. The unchained self forgives, recognizing that obedience was survival, not weakness. Forgiveness clears the path for growth, ensuring the future is not shackled by guilt. The 18th step is creating new narratives. Obedience tells stories of fear and submission, shaping identity through silence. The unchained self writes new stories of resistance, resilience, and triumph. These narratives redefine who the self is and who it can become. Stories become tools of liberation, shaping futures rather than repeating past chains. The 19th step is protecting truth. Once freedom is gained, it must be defended. The unchained self guards honesty fiercely, refusing to allow silence to creep back in. Protecting truth becomes an act of vigilance, ensuring that chains never rebuild in shadows. Freedom requires constant awareness. The 20th step is building. The obedient mind survives. The unchained self creates freed from silence. It builds relationships of authenticity, communities of resistance, and visions of possibility. Creation becomes proof of liberation, showing that freedom is not only the absence of chains, but the presence of growth. The 21st step is refusing borrowed peace. The unchained self understands that peace bought with silence is an illusion. It chooses instead the harder path of truth, even if it brings conflict. Real peace is forged through honesty, not avoidance. Each refusal of false peace strengthens freedom's foundation. The 22nd step is teaching others. Liberation grows when it is shared. The unchained self mentors, inspires, and supports those still bound. Each lesson passed on breaks another link in the chain of obedience. Freedom is multiplied when it becomes communal, not just individual. The 23rd step is embracing uncertainty. Chains promise safety, but freedom requires risk. The unchained self learns to accept the unknown, to step forward even without guarantees. Uncertainty is not danger, but possibility. In embracing it, the self proves that freedom is stronger than fear. The 24th step is persistence. Authority adapts, fear returns, silence tempts. But the unchained self continues, refusing to surrender. Persistence transforms freedom from a moment into a lifetime. Each act of resilience deepens liberation, ensuring chains do not reform in the shadows of fatigue. The 25th step is transcendence. The unchained self is not only free from obedience, but free for purpose. It lives not just without chains, but with intention, building, loving, dreaming, and resisting. Transcendence is the final step, moving beyond survival into the fullness of life, unbound and unstoppable. What lives in silence does not stay hidden forever. The conflict inside your mind waits for the moment you finally notice it, the moment you dare to see what obedience has cost you. Every unspoken thought, every surrendered choice, every quiet compromise leaves a mark. But awareness breaks the pattern. The instant you choose honesty over habit, courage over comfort, you step beyond submission. This journey is not about defiance alone, it is about reclaiming yourself. The voice you thought was gone has only been waiting, and now it is yours to carry forward.